Hey, good morning. It's me, Mr. Truman, back again for another video on geometry. Today we're going to be looking at angles and arcs formed by using chords and secants in a circle. So we've gone over chords in our last lesson, and when we looked at a chord, we wanted to go over the fact that a chord was the segment that intercepts the circle at two locations. Now today we're going to introduce a new term called a secant, and a secant is a line. Not a segment, but a line that intercepts or intersects a circle at two locations. So this is a picture of a chord. These are both chords, whereas this is a secant. And you can see it's a line that goes through. Well, our focus today is we're going to be looking at the angles that are formed and the arcs that are formed by intersecting secants and intersecting chords. So in this first example, my first thing here, I have written down our formula, and this is looking at what happens when in this case, two chords intersect inside of a circle, on the interior of a circle. And the way we calculate the angle is we take the two arcs and we add them together and divide them by 2. Basically, we average them. So we take the first one and the second one, just simply add them up and divide by 2. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right into my first example, and then we'll look at our other formula in a moment. But on my first example, I have two arcs. I have 150 and a 22. And what I'm going to try to do is, and I forgot to write my variable, my bad. Don't have my lesson planned out right. But anyways, what I'm going to try to do is find that angle. So when I look at this, I say 150 plus 22, and x equals 150 plus 22 divided by 2. So if I take the two things, I add them up, I get 172, and I divide that by 2, and I get 86. So x is equal to 86 degrees. Now, just so we know for future references, if it's x is equal to 86 here, just know that on the other side of this would also be equal to 86. I say that because I don't want the x to be on the other side and somebody think that's a different formula. It isn't. These are called vertical angles, and they're always congruent. So it doesn't matter if I put the x there or I put the x there. Either way, I still get the same answer. And it's worth knowing, though, that we should always keep in mind from a previous chapter that if somebody were to ask us what this one is, well, we would say that's 94. And if I didn't just pull that number out of thin air, I figured that number out because what do we know about these two angles? If they make a straight line like this chord is, then those two angles are supplementary, meaning they have to add up to 180. So just something from a previous lesson that we should always just keep in mind, because you never know if they have multiple variables on a question. All right, well, look at number 2 here. We can see in number 2 there's a little bit of a different situation, because in the formula I say add the arcs together and divide by 2. However, this time I'm missing one of the arcs, but I do have the angle. So if I use those numbers and I substitute them into my formula, I've got, well, I'm going to write my formula. X equals arc 1 plus arc divided by 2. Well, I know one of the arcs, and I actually know what x is, or I know that my angle is 85. And in this case, I know that x plus 50 divided by 2 is supposed to equal 85. So I kind of had to rearrange the formula since x was going to be my angle, and I should have wrote it that way. I should have wrote angle equals the two arcs added together divided by 2. Well, if I work that out backwards or work in reverse, I know that I can times both sides by 2, and I get 170 equals x plus 50. Well, I can get the final answer by just simply minusing 50 from both sides, and that tells me that the missing arc, in this case not the angle, the arc is 120. And I figured it out. Okay, so with that being said, let's keep moving to our next formula. In this case, we have in the diagram two secants, two lines that go through the circle, and those secants have have run into each other. They've intersected outside the circle, not in the circle, outside the circle. So when I figure that out, it's a little bit different, because before I added them together, this time I'm going to subtract them. And most importantly, when you do subtraction, the order counts. Because if I take, for example, 5 minus 10, I get negative 5. But if I say 10 minus 5, I get positive 5. Well, I got to think about that. I can't have a negative angle. There's no such thing as a negative angle in this class at this point. So we need to make sure that when we do our formula, that we make sure the larger of the two numbers comes first. That's what arc 2 needs to be in this case. It needs to be the larger of the number. So we just got to make sure that we always use the bigger number first. Otherwise, we're going to get a negative angle, and that really doesn't make sense. Although we know it's not really a different number, we still want to make sure we do it right. So with that, let's take the first example. I have 160 and I've got 30. I need to write it so that the 160 is the larger number. So I'm going to say 160 minus 30 divided by 2. Well, 160 minus 30 is 130 divided by 2, which is 65. So the missing angle is 65 degrees. Again, it wouldn't be a big deal if I wrote it backwards. I would just have to make sure that at the end I keep in my head that there's not a negative angle. Please don't select negative if it was multiple choice, and if it was fill in the blank, don't put negative 65. Make sure you write 65. Not that big a deal, but sometimes it can really mess you up and make a situation confusing. All right, on our very last example for this video, and I'm trying to keep this one a short video, I have one arc, which seems to be the larger arc, and then I got a smaller one that I don't know, and then I have the angle formed. Well, if I put those into the formula, I need to, again, think about it. 172 is going to be the larger number. So 172 minus x divided by 2 should equal 34. Using that same reverse method here, I got to times out, get rid of that fraction. So now these cancel, and I got 172 minus x is 68. Well, to solve for x, I want to minus 172. And I've got negative x equals negative 104. Well, I'm not done yet because it says negative x. So if I divide by negative 1, I end up with x equals 104. Because the two negatives cancel and it becomes 104. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is called the angles and arcs formed by secants and chords. I hope this helps. Thank you.